I never cease to be amazed at the expansive country which is now the United States. And Canada, my goodness, with its vast territory and resources, what a tremendous treasure. In my day, we didn't know how to draw maps of the territory west of the Mississippi River. Travel was extremely slow across the Appalachian wilderness, and only a few feeble settlements existed in Kentucky and Ohio. But now, all the way west to California, British Columbia, Alaska, and even Hawaii, this is all settled and populated to one degree or another. And it's all the North American division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. With the island of Bermuda to the east, the North American division embraces cultures as diverse as American Indian, British, French, African, Caribbean, Spanish, Eskimo, Asian, and Polynesian. Nearly 1 million people are Seventh-day Adventists in the North American division. There are 10 other divisions which include nearly every country of the world. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about how they communicate with each other and how you can write for church publications. First of all, let's look at how the Seventh-day Adventist Church is organized. We'll use the North American division as an example.
Your local church is the basic unit of organization. Local church newsletters will be discussed in the next lesson. Your congregation is part of a local conference along with many other churches in your state or several states. There are 56 local conferences in the North American Division territory. Many of them have regular conference-wide newsletters. The conferences are grouped into 9 union conferences, ranging from 5 to 8 local conferences per union. There are 9 union conferences in the North American Division. Each of them has a union paper. All over the world, the organization is much the same. This lesson will deal mostly with the union papers. The union paper is the primary church publication to which the church communication leader is expected to submit articles. Size and frequency of publication varies from one union to the next. Some publish every other week. Others are monthly. In most unions, the conference communication director is your contact for all communication activities. Send your stories for the union paper to him. He knows the special style and format requirements of your union paper and may also include your story in the conference newsletter. Contact your conference communication director if you are unsure of the procedure for submitting copy for your union paper. He will supply you with information about the format and style requirements of your union paper and the conference newsletter, deadlines, and editorial, photography, and submission policies. Read this material carefully and follow it closely. Look at the publication itself and see how the policies are carried out. The closer you match the style and policies of any publication, the more likely it is your article will be published.
Remember to write differently for different publications. Don't submit the same article to the union paper and your local newspaper. Consider the differences in the audiences of the two publications. Also, consider the differences in territory served by the two publications. These and other factors should affect the way an article is written. For instance, in an article for the local newspaper, you may need to explain the term Sabbath school. You would not need to explain that term for the readers of a union paper. Let's discuss some general principles of reporting local church news which will save you time, make you a better reporter, and make it more likely that your story will be printed. A stitch in time saves 9, as I have often said. These principles will be useful whether you submit your story to the conference newsletter, the union paper, or your local newspaper, or all of them.
The most important thing you can do in reporting church news is to plan ahead. Find out about upcoming events as early as possible so you can evaluate their newsworthiness. According to the church manual, The communication leader is an automatic member of the church board. This is so you will be aware of events from the time the earliest plans are made. Evaluate the newsworthiness of each event for the various news outlets available to you. Some events could go in your church newsletter but would not be accepted by the union paper. Apply the news writing principles in Lesson 3. Is the event unusual? Is there a prominent person involved? Does the event affect a large number of people? Does the event relate to the locality served by the publication? Does it have human interest value?
After you have decided to report on an event and what publications would probably be interested, decide who will write the article and take the pictures. In a small church, you may not have anyone but yourself to call on. But even in a small church, you might find someone whose hobby is photography, who would be willing to help. Perhaps a young lad or lass who would be excited to be a part of the process. That way, you would be free to gather information and write the article. In a large church with a communication committee, the communication leader can assign committee members to handle various reporting and photography projects. Usually, a larger church has more going on, so more people are needed. We'll talk more about the communication committee in Lesson 5. You should assemble as much information as possible before the event takes place, so there will not be many questions to answer at the event itself or when you sit down to write the article. It's a good idea to try to write a draft of the article before the event if you have enough information. This will help you to think of important questions you might not think of until too late, and it will help you finish before your deadline. I recently talked to Elwin Plattner, editor of the Pacific Union Recorder, about his priorities. Mr. Plattner, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has the Adventist Review, Signs of the Times, and many other magazines. Why does it spend money to produce union papers?
Well, the union paper must deal with things that are within a specific union. The review, signs, can't deal with those things because they are something that is of an international responsibility. They cannot allow the space that we would like to use for various church items, for various conference and union items that we need for our own union paper.
Well, does that mean that since the union paper goes to a smaller group, that I can send a sermon or a poem or anything I want?
Generally, what we reserve our space for is news items, things of a policy nature, things that are important to the daily life of the church itself rather than strictly of a theological nature.
Do you like to have most of your articles written in basic news format?
Yes, we do. We like to develop a magazine that has news just like any other magazine. Although the focus of our publication will be strictly on church rather than the general secular material.
What would you tell a communication leader to do to be sure to get an article printed in your union paper?
What you need to do is plan ahead and make sure that you know what the event is going to be, what's happening there, and cover all your bases. Number one, you need to write a story about it just as soon as possible and submit it to the local conference correspondent after the event has occurred. Then the union paper correspondent in your conference will send it on to the editor of the union paper, and from there he takes it on into publication.
Now, let's say I'm a communication leader and I have submitted a report, but it doesn't get printed. What might I have done wrong?
It could be you didn't do anything wrong. However, if you have written it in such a way that it takes a lot of time to rewrite, it may get set aside because something else has already been prepared in such a way that it can be used. Another reason would be that the event was the story was submitted too late to make it into press. It became so old that it couldn't be used. So you want to be right there with your story just as soon as the event occurs. News is something that's new, and that's why we call it a news magazine. If the event or story is something that's very commonplace and not necessarily something that's of broad interest, it may not be used either. For instance, if you have an ordination of church elders and deacons, this is something that happens in all churches. And unless it's an unusual individual who has gone through some really difficult problems, who has finally made it to this point, and you can develop it into a major story, a human interest story, then it probably won't be used. This would include such things as baby dedications, maybe even cooking schools, or baptisms. As important as baptisms are, they're something that's very commonplace and probably wouldn't be used unless, again, it's something that's very unusual.
Suppose I'm running late. Since it's so important to get it to you quickly, should I just send it directly to the editor at the union office instead of going through the conference?
The normal procedure for submitting an article for your union paper is to only send it to the conference correspondent. If you bypass this, the editor will probably send it back to the local conference correspondent, and you'll lose quite a bit of time. An editor normally has a large volume of material to do. The local correspondent in your conference has the responsibility of taking your story and making sure it's in the style of the union paper. By doing this, it saves a tremendous amount of time for the editor. You see, there's a very small staff in an editorial office, and they can't do everything. And so you send your story to the local conference correspondent, who will take it then and mold it into the style of the publication. And then it has a much better chance of moving through the procedure into publication.
When I was publishing the Pennsylvania Gazette, we set the type by hand and printed the paper right in my shop. But I understand that things have come a long way since then.
That's right. The computer age has come into the union paper office already. And we have already begun using computers to put our publication to bed in press, you might say, with the computer and with the little disk that has been developed to use in the computer. This speeds up the printing process a significant amount and saves a lot of time and money in the process. News material comes to us in a variety of forms. Primarily it comes on pages of copy, someone like these that you see here. But to put those into computers requires that the copy go either into the computer by hand or by using a scanner, which picks up the copy and just simply puts it right into the computer. At that point, the editor can decide how it's to lay on the page, and by simply using a special software program, the whole design work is done on the computer and then completed in the final step by putting it on a disk, and this then is sent to the printer for publication.